A prisoner sits alone in darkness, his face hidden behind an iron mask. No one is meant to know his name, no one is meant to see his face, and if the secret is ever revealed, the throne of France itself could be shaken. This is The Man in the Iron Mask by Alexandre Dumas. Before long, one question hangs over everything. Who is the masked prisoner, and why is his existence so dangerous that powerful men would rather bury him alive than let the truth escape? I'm Roger Braveheart, and a very warm welcome to the 33-Minute Stories channel. These stories are for anyone who has ever wished they had read the great classics at school, but never quite got around to it. Because the story is read to you, you can leave it playing in the background, carry on with another task, and simply listen as the dangerous, secretive and dramatic world of the Man in the Iron Mask unfolds. By the end, you'll understand the story well enough to enjoy it, remember it, and sound a little more well-read when it comes up in conversation. My challenge is to summarise this great swashbuckling classic as an enjoyable story lasting approximately 33 minutes. Wish me luck. Okay, so, without further delay, let's get cracking. Aramis enters the Bastile under the authority of a powerful religious order and meets a mysterious young prisoner named Philippe. The captive has spent nearly his entire life behind walls, yet he speaks with intelligence, dignity, and a strange acceptance of confinement. Aramis slowly breaks through his caution by recalling his childhood home, his tutor, and his nurse. Philippe explains how, at 15, he recovered a letter from a well and discovered that the Queen had secretly taken an interest in him. His guardians were later killed, and he was removed to the Bastile. Aramis then reveals the truth deliberately hidden from him. Philippe is the twin brother of Louis XIV. He was concealed because uncertainty over which twin was born first might have divided France and threatened the throne. Aramis gives him a portrait of Louis, and for the first time a mirror. Philippe sees that he and the king are almost perfectly identical. Aramis offers to free him, replace Louis with him, and place the present king in the prison that Philippe has endured. The captive hesitates between a quiet life in freedom and the crown denied to him, but he agrees to hear more once Aramis releases him. Elsewhere, Porthos faces what seems to him an equally terrible crisis. None of his magnificent clothes fits. For years his servant has been measured in his place, but the servant has grown much larger without warning him. D'Artagnan finds Porthos surrounded by useless finery and takes him to the king's tailor. There they meet the playwright, who ingeniously measures Porthos by tracing his reflection in a mirror, while assistants support his arms. Porthos is delighted by this respectful method, unaware that his vanity is inspiring comedy. While this diversion unfolds, Aramis persuades the reluctant tailor to reveal the patterns and fabrics of 5 new suits being made for Louis. He claims that Fouquet wants an exact royal portrait as a surprise for the festivities at Vaux, but D'Artagnan senses a deeper scheme. At Fouquet's residence, poets, painters, and performers prepare entertainments for the king. Beneath the laughter and creativity, however, Aramis quietly gathers the materials needed to make another man look exactly like Louis XIV. Aramis returns to the Bastile and dines with its governor, carefully encouraging him to drink while waiting for a royal messenger. When an order of release arrives for a minor prisoner, Aramis secretly replaces it with a forged order, naming Philippe under the prison name Marchiali. The governor notices the apparent discrepancy and hesitates, but Aramis reveals that he is the general of the religious order, to which the frightened man owes obedience. That higher authority overcomes every objection. Philippe is brought from his cell, made to swear silence about the Bastile, and led into Aramis's waiting carriage. Once the final gate closes behind them, the imprisoned twin experiences open sky, speed, and liberty for the first time. In a forest, Aramis explains the full design. Louis XIV, shaped by humiliation and unchecked power, will become a harmful ruler, while Philippe possesses the appearance and blood needed to replace him. Aramis argues that the king can be imprisoned without being killed and may later be pardoned. Yet he also admits his own ambition. After making Philippe king, he expects to become a cardinal, then first minister, and eventually pope. Together they would divide power over the temporal and spiritual worlds. Philippe is tempted, but still troubled by conscience and by the possible fate of his brother. Aramis therefore offers him another future, a hidden life in a remote marshland with freedom, money, nature, and no crown. Standing beneath the night sky, Philippe considers that peaceful existence. At last, ambition triumphs. He orders Aramis to lead him to the crown of France, and the two seal their compact. Aramis then tests Philippe's knowledge of the court. The prince has memorized descriptions of the royal family, the king's mistress, Fouquet, the king's finance minister, D'Artagnan, and the habits needed to impersonate Louis. Meanwhile, the palace of Vaux is prepared for the king's arrival with extraordinary magnificence. Fouquet has gathered architecture, gardens, paintings, fountains, theatre, food, and poetry into a display greater than anything the king possesses. A painter completes a portrait of Louis wearing the exact clothes copied from the tailor's patterns, making the hidden purpose of Aramis's preparations clearer. The royal party travels toward Vaux, but the king's finance minister delays the journey with a formal reception at Melun. D'Artagnan, already suspicious of Aramis, recognizes the delay as another move in the struggle against Fouquet. By evening, Louis reaches Vaux without his full escort, entering as a guest the very palace where Aramis intends to steal his throne. Fouquet welcomes Louis XIV to Vaux with astonishing magnificence. The palace glows with lights, the gardens seem enchanted, and the king is surrounded by rare food, costly plate, music, flowers, fountains, and attentive servants. Yet every new wonder wounds his pride. Fouquet's wealth and taste surpass the royal household, making the king feel less honoured than eclipsed. During an evening walk, Louis finds a private moment with his mistress, but D'Artagnan and Fouquet remain near enough to observe them. Later, the king retires to a splendid chamber decorated with painted dreams and nightmares, unaware that Aramis has prepared a far more dangerous dream beneath his bed. D'Artagnan, already suspicious of Aramis's secret preparations and his interest in the king's clothing patterns, confronts his old friend. Aramis answers with a carefully framed oath that convinces the captain he does not intend to harm Louis. Hidden nearby, Philippe listens and realizes how formidable D'Artagnan may prove if the substitution is discovered. Through an opening above the royal chamber, Aramis and Philippe then overhear Louis speaking with Fouquet's rival. The official presents evidence suggesting that 13 million livres entrusted to Fouquet were never properly restored. Already resentful of Vaux's splendour, the king becomes increasingly willing to believe that the superintendent's magnificence was purchased with stolen royal money. The next day brings games, performances, and fresh marvels, but Louis remains cold and preoccupied. When he speaks of arresting Fouquet, the king's mistress courageously protests. Whatever Fouquet may have done, she argues, seizing him beneath his own roof would dishonour a sovereign who has accepted his hospitality. Her words nearly restrain the king. Fouquet's rival then secretly plants an old, undated love letter written by the superintendent and makes Louis believe that his mistress has dropped it. The king reads Fouquet's declaration of love, and jealousy destroys the mercy that gratitude had almost awakened. Louis summons D'Artagnan and orders him to arrest Fouquet. The captain protests that such an arrest, made while the king is still Fouquet's guest, would be shameful. He also demands written instructions, warning that a command issued in anger may later be regretted. The king postpones the arrest until morning, and orders D'Artagnan merely to watch Fouquet through the night. While Louis sleeps, the hidden mechanism beneath his bed lowers him into a subterranean passage. Masked and armed, Aramis and Porthos seize the bewildered king, force him into a carriage, and carry him to the Bastile. There Aramis convinces the governor that the earlier release of the prisoner called Marchiali was a mistake, and that the man now being returned is insane, particularly because he claims to be the king. Porthos keeps his weapon trained on Louis while the deception is completed. Locked inside Philippe's former cell, Louis first believes that he must be dreaming or dead. When the truth becomes undeniable, he rages, breaks furniture, calls for the governor, and loudly declares his identity. The jailers treat these protests as proof of madness. Ignored and powerless, the king, who has condemned others to captivity, now feels the terror of being imprisoned, disbelieved, and cut off from every sign of royal authority. While Louis suffers in the Bastille, D'Artagnan remains with Fouquet at Vaux, carrying out the king's delayed order without openly arresting him. He refuses to leave the superintendent alone, yet treats him with sympathy and dignity. Fouquet understands that he is under guard. When D'Artagnan briefly leaves to look for Aramis, Fouquet searches his secret compartments and hurriedly burns letters, contracts, papers, and other writings that could make his already dangerous position even worse. The two men speak through the night, and D'Artagnan urges him to face disgrace bravely, rather than collapse beneath it. At dawn, Aramis appears with what seems to be a royal order setting Fouquet free. Philippe has taken Louis's place, and his voice, manner, appearance, and carefully memorized knowledge deceive the household. D'Artagnan is astonished by Aramis's sudden influence, but obeys the order. Once the captain leaves, Aramis tells Fouquet everything. He expects gratitude. He has removed the hostile king, installed Philippe, and saved Fouquet from ruin. Instead, Fouquet is horrified. Whatever Louis intended against him, the king was his guest, and Aramis used Fouquet's house to commit an act of treason. Fouquet rejects the conspiracy, gives Aramis 4 hours to flee, and rides immediately toward the Bastile. At the prison, the governor resists every demand for access, hiding behind regulations and the need for royal authorization. Fouquet threatens to summon troops, storm the fortress, and accuse the governor of treason. At last, he reaches the cell and finds Louis exhausted, bloodied, and nearly mad with rage. The king first believes Fouquet is responsible, but the superintendent explains the plot and restores him to freedom. Fouquet then asks mercy for Aramis and Porthos. Louis refuses. Worse still, Fouquet admits that he has already given them time to escape to Belle-Isle, a stronghold he believes the royal army cannot easily take. Although Fouquet has saved his life and throne, Louis's wounded pride turns the rescue into another grievance. Back at Vaux, Philippe receives the royal family and survives several dangerous moments, including a conversation with the Queen Mother. He cautiously imitates his brother while trying to master a court he has known only through Aramis's lessons. For a short time, he appears to possess the crown completely. Then Louis enters with Fouquet. The identical brothers face one another, and the court is thrown into terror and confusion. D'Artagnan instinctively obeys the Louis who has arrived with the superintendent and arrests Philippe. The false king accepts defeat with dignity, while Fouquet mourns the failure of a prince he now recognizes as equal in blood and perhaps greater in spirit. Louis orders Philippe taken to a remote island prison, with his face permanently covered by an iron mask that he must never remove on pain of death. Aramis and Porthos flee Vaux at desperate speed. Porthos believes the promised reward still awaits him, and imagines that he is riding toward a dukedom. Aramis knows their conspiracy has collapsed and that every mile may decide whether they live. When exhausted horses delay them, they turn toward Athos's home. There Aramis confesses the entire plot: the liberation of Philippe, the substitution of the twins, Fouquet's refusal, and the danger now hanging over them. Athos calls the scheme a great idea, but also a great error. His chief concern is Porthos, who joined Aramis out of trust and never understood the treason. Aramis promises to protect him and takes him toward Belle-Isle, where the fortifications may offer refuge. The farewell between the old companions carries a sense of finality. Athos watches Aramis and Porthos disappear and feels that he will never see them again. Another separation soon approaches. Raoul remains broken by the king's seizure of his former fiancée's love. Athos tries to soften his bitterness, explaining that genuine love rather than ambition drew her toward Louis XIV, but reason cannot heal him. The commander of an expedition against the Arabs arrives and invites Raoul to join him in Africa. Raoul accepts and declares his intention of entering a religious military order, a choice that would keep him away from France. Athos understands that his son is seeking either oblivion or death. He does not forbid him, but the decision leaves father and son almost unable to speak. In Paris, Raoul encounters his former fiancée's old companion, and then discovers a secret meeting between the king's sister-in-law and Raoul's friend. Rather than expose them, he protects their secret and warns his friend that intrigue is gathering around the king's mistress. Raoul asks him to defend her if danger comes, proving that his love survives even after hope has died. Preparations for the African expedition continue. A retired grocer, once D'Artagnan's servant, is selling his business and moving to the country. A map in his home shows that D'Artagnan has travelled toward the Mediterranean, though no one knows why. The commander of the expedition, meanwhile, gives away possessions, raises money, and imagines glory abroad. Athos sees disorder beneath the enthusiasm. Ships, provisions, and soldiers are not properly prepared. He therefore accompanies Raoul southward, determined to help his son fulfill his duties honourably, even though he fears the journey will end in death. The old world of shared adventure is breaking apart, and each road now leads one of the friends toward loss. Athos and Raoul reach the Mediterranean coast while helping prepare the African expedition. A fisherman tells them that a mysterious traveller forced him to carry a large case to an island prison. During the voyage, a masked figure emerged from the case, and the frightened crew abandoned the boat. Curious and uneasy, Athos and Raoul visit the island. A silver plate is thrown from a barred window. Scratched into it is a desperate message from a prisoner claiming to be the king's brother, and warning that he will soon be called mad. Soldiers fire at the two men for reading it, but D'Artagnan intervenes. He pretends they are Spaniards, unable to understand French, and saves them from arrest. Privately, Athos reveals that Aramis has already told him enough to confirm Philippe's identity. D'Artagnan is dismayed that another friend now carries the dangerous secret. He admits that Philippe is confined under the Iron Mask, and fears that everyone connected with the truth may die unhappily. D'Artagnan receives orders to return to Paris. Before leaving, he tries to persuade Raoul not to seek death, and offers to carry a message to the king's mistress. Raoul writes only that he still loves her and intends to die as punishment for saying it. Father and son then proceed to Toulon. Athos warns Raoul against throwing away his life in reckless heroism, while Raoul promises to remember him. Athos's faithful servant secretly prepares to accompany the young man. When the fleet finally sails, Athos stands on the shore until even the last trace of Raoul's ship disappears. In Paris, D'Artagnan finds the court changed. Louis XIV depends more heavily upon his mistress, while Fouquet's political position grows worse. D'Artagnan speaks with the young woman, and tells her plainly that Raoul has joined the war because of his despair. Soon afterward, the king orders the captain to prepare quarters at Nantes and place musketeers around important officials, including Fouquet. D'Artagnan recognizes that another trap is forming. At the same time, the old court schemer allies herself with the king's finance minister. She reveals Aramis's position within the religious order and urges his destruction. Their conversation shows that Fouquet's downfall will not be enough. The remaining architect of the royal substitution must also be silenced. Thus, Philippe remains hidden behind iron. Raoul sails toward danger, Athos returns to loneliness, and the political machinery closes around Fouquet, Aramis, and Porthos. Fouquet travels toward Nantes by river, hoping to reach the Assembly of the States before his enemies can act. Another lighter follows him with greater speed but refuses to pass. Fouquet and his loyal aide recognize the king's finance minister aboard it and understand that they are being watched. Both vessels continue in tense parallel until they reach Nantes. The D'Artagnan visits Fouquet and quietly warns him that troops guard the castle, roads, boats, and official lodgings. Although the captain never openly tells him to flee, every detail points toward arrest. Fouquet finally understands and prepares to escape, but Louis XIV arrives earlier than expected. Summoned before the king, Fouquet asks directly whether he has been accused. Louis avoids a clear answer, advises him to rest, and speaks of visiting Belle-Isle. Fouquet tests him by offering to conduct him there, and the king's evasions confirm the danger. After Fouquet leaves, Louis orders D'Artagnan to arrest him and place him in a barred carriage. The captain follows reluctantly. Fouquet's aide has arranged horses and a boat, and the superintendent escapes on a magnificent white horse. D'Artagnan pursues on a black one. The chase becomes a contest of endurance, with both animals driven beyond their strength. D'Artagnan fires at Fouquet's horse but refuses to shoot the man. His own horse falls dead, yet he continues on foot until he catches Fouquet by the leg. Fouquet could still kill or abandon him, but instead he throws away his pistols, tends the exhausted captain, and surrenders. D'Artagnan recognizes that the supposed criminal has behaved more royally than the king. Fouquet is carried away under guard. D'Artagnan then confronts the king's finance minister for ordering a brutal search of Fouquet's home. Louis forces the two men to make peace, but immediately sends Fouquet toward the Bastile and orders D'Artagnan to take Belle-Isle. The captain understands that success may require the deaths of Aramis and Porthos. At Belle-Isle, the two fugitives notice fishing boats disappearing and realize a royal fleet is closing the island. Porthos still does not fully understand why they are in danger. Aramis orders the batteries prepared, while hoping D'Artagnan may offer some path to safety. A messenger arrives from the fleet with confirmation that Fouquet has been arrested and that Belle-Isle must surrender. Aramis asks D'Artagnan to come ashore in person. The fortress waits under arms while the old friends prepare to meet across the dividing line between royal obedience and outlawed loyalty. Aramis finally tells Porthos the truth. They have not been serving the rightful Louis XIV, but the imprisoned twin whom Aramis tried to place on the throne. Porthos is distressed less by the charge of rebellion than by the loss of the dukedom he expected. Yet he forgives Aramis because he believes his friend acted with good intentions. D'Artagnan comes ashore under the watch of a royal officer, ordered to hear everything he says. The captain threatens the man, but the officer's courage wins his respect, and he is granted a private conversation. D'Artagnan explains that the king's forces have sealed every route of escape. He urges Porthos to return with him and plead innocence, but Porthos refuses to abandon Aramis. The captain devises a plan to resign his command, hoping the resulting confusion will let them escape. Louis and his advisers have anticipated him. Secret orders state that the moment D'Artagnan resigns, another officer must take command and send him back to France as a prisoner. He is forced to leave while the attack begins. At Belle-Isle, Porthos reflects on a family warning. Both his grandfather and father felt a strange weakness in their legs shortly before death. Aramis dismisses the fear and prepares a hidden boat in the grotto of Loch Maria. Royal troops land before they can escape. Porthos and Aramis repel the first assault, and Porthos captures a young royal officer. Over supper, the prisoner reveals that the orders are to kill the defenders in battle or hang them afterward. He also turns out to be the son of a soldier once known to the old Musketeers, and affection briefly crosses the line between enemies. When fighting erupts elsewhere on the island, Aramis releases the officer and asks him to seek mercy. Aramis then addresses the islanders, announces Fouquet's arrest, and commands them to lay down their arms rather than die for a lost cause. He and Porthos flee toward the grotto. The pursuing royal officers follow hunting dogs into the cave. Aramis and Porthos kill the animals to keep the secret exit hidden. The released young officer tries to prevent his companions from entering, but suspicion and courage drive them forward. Gunfire erupts in the darkness. Several men die, and the survivors discover that only 2 legendary musketeers are holed in the cavern. Reinforcements arrive, and the young officer, torn between his word and his duty, leads another advance without drawing his sword. Porthos and Aramis wait inside, surrounded, with their hidden boat still not safely launched. The royal soldiers press deeper into the grotto, where darkness turns Porthos into an invisible force. Hidden behind a pillar, he brings down an iron bar again and again, crushing the men who enter. Their officers cannot understand what is killing them until flashes of gunfire briefly reveal bodies piled across the passage. Aramis knows that even Porthos cannot stop an entire army forever. He prepares a barrel of powder, attaches a fuse, and gives Porthos a burning match, telling him to throw the barrel among the attackers before escaping to the hidden boat. Porthos applies the flame, waits until the soldiers have crowded together, and hurls the barrel into their midst. The explosion tears through the cavern. Soldiers, weapons, and stone vanish amid fire, smoke, and collapsing rock. For a moment, escape seems certain. Then the weakness Porthos feared seizes his legs. He struggles toward daylight while Aramis calls to him from the shore. Massive rocks fall around him. Porthos holds them back with superhuman strength, but the crushing weight grows too great. His final words acknowledge only that the burden is too heavy. The rocks close over him, forming a tomb worthy of his gigantic body. Aramis tries desperately to reach him, then is carried to the boat, shattered by the death of the companion he deceived but loved. A royal vessel overtakes the fugitives at sea. Its commander promises the sailors their lives, but demands Aramis. Once aboard, however, Aramis displays a sign that the officer recognizes and respects. The supposed captive is treated with deference, and the vessel turns towards Spain. Aramis remains on deck through the night, gazing back toward the island and the grave of the friend he has lost. D'Artagnan returns to Nantes, furious at being watched, overruled, and prevented from helping his friends. He resigns, but Louis has him brought back. The king accuses him of placing personal loyalty above royal service, while D'Artagnan condemns the cruelty of sending him against his oldest companions. During this confrontation, Louis reports only that the defenders have fled Belle-Isle. He does not yet tell D'Artagnan that Porthos is dead or confirm Aramis's escape. He argues that France can have only one master, and insists that the independence of the old warrior must yield to royal authority. D'Artagnan finally resumes his service, not because his objections have disappeared, but because serving the king has become the habit of 30 years, and he cannot easily abandon the familiar acknowledgement that has shaped his life. After returning to Paris, D'Artagnan reports Porthos's death to Louis. The king answers that he already knows. Porthos was buried beneath the rocks, while Aramis seized a royal vessel and escaped toward Bayonne. Louis even possesses a copy of the letter Aramis sent to D'Artagnan. Although he could try to have the fugitive seized beyond France, the king declares that Aramis may remain free. Fouquet's grieving friends then appear before Louis and ask permission to support the superintendent's abandoned wife, who has been left without the necessities of life. Their loyalty moves the king to allow the gift, though not to release Fouquet. Porthos is gone, Fouquet is ruined, and Aramis lives only through exile. D'Artagnan remains beside the throne, but he has entered a colder world in which courage and friendship still command respect without being able to undo the destruction already caused. D'Artagnan travels to Porthos's estate for the reading of his will. The dead giant leaves his lands, wealth, horses, dogs, weapons, plate, and books to Raoul, with instructions that D'Artagnan may take anything he wishes, and that Aramis must be supported if he remains in exile. Porthos leaves his clothes to his devoted servant and asks that the man always be kept happy. Overcome by grief, the servant lies upon his master's garments and dies there. Meanwhile, Athos declines rapidly after Raoul's departure. He no longer walks, eats, or speaks as before. A doctor can find no ordinary cure because the true illness is separation. Athos says he is simply waiting for the summons of either his son or God. In a fevered vision, he sees the African battlefield covered with bodies and watches Raoul rise beyond the earth, beckoning him upward. His faithful servant then arrives with the news Athos already understands. Raoul is dead. Athos smiles, turns toward the heavens, and quietly follows him. D'Artagnan arrives too late and finds father and son laid beside one another. The commander's report explains that Raoul deliberately rode toward the enemy lines, ignored orders to return, and continued after his horse was shot. Wounded many times, he still lived briefly, but moved in a way that reopened his wounds and ensured his death. A lock of his former fiancée's hair remained pressed against his heart. Athos and Raoul are buried together. At their grave, D'Artagnan encounters the king's mistress, who has come to ask forgiveness. He initially condemns her, but she predicts that her brief happiness will bring its own punishment. Years pass. Fouquet remains imprisoned, while Aramis returns as a Spanish duke and secures Spain's neutrality in the coming war. Louis has taken a new mistress, and Raoul's former fiancée is already being pushed aside. D'Artagnan receives command in the war against the United Provinces and wins a series of victories. The king rewards him with the rank of Marshal of France. The promised baton arrives while D'Artagnan is directing an assault. At that same moment, a cannonball strikes him in the chest. He sees the enemy surrender and dies holding the symbol of his final honour, bidding farewell to Athos and Porthos, and parting forever from Aramis. Of the four inseparable companions, only Aramis remains alive. Their adventures end not with shared triumph, but with separation. One beneath the rocks, one beside his son, one on the battlefield, and one surviving far from the others. I think the story is warning us that power without conscience can turn people into objects. Philippe is hidden because his existence threatens political certainty. Louis XIV is kidnapped because Aramis sees him as an obstacle. Fouquet is destroyed because the king and his finance minister see his wealth, popularity, and independence as dangers. Even loyal men are valued chiefly for what they can accomplish. The book suggests that once authority becomes absolute, gratitude is easily forgotten and suspicion becomes stronger than justice. I also believe the story draws a sharp distinction between intelligence and wisdom. Aramis is brilliant enough to discover Philippe, manipulate the Bastile, deceive the court, and exchange two kings. Yet his plan fails because he misjudges Fouquet's conscience. Aramis understands systems, disguises, and ambitions, but he does not fully understand the honourable man whose house he uses. His magnificent design collapses not through lack of cleverness, but because moral character cannot always be calculated. Fouquet's fate seems especially important to me. He saves the king who intended to arrest him, refuses to profit from treason, and gives Aramis and Porthos time to escape. Louis responds by imprisoning him anyway. The story may therefore be suggesting that honourable action does not guarantee worldly reward. Virtue matters because it defines the person who acts, not because rulers or institutions will necessarily repay it. The old Musketeers offer another message. Their greatest strength once came from unity, expressed through loyalty to one another. Here that unity is broken by secrecy, conflicting duties, ambition and time. Porthos follows Aramis without understanding the cause, and dies for that trust. D'Artagnan serves the king, but suffers whenever obedience threatens friendship. Athos survives political danger only to be defeated by grief. I think their endings show that courage can resist armies, prisons and kings, yet still be powerless against age, separation and the loss of those we love. Raoul's death adds a darker warning about despair. He cannot imagine a life beyond rejected love, so he turns military duty into a path toward death. His choice destroys Athos as surely as any weapon. The story does not present that destruction as victory. It leaves grief spreading from one person to another. Finally, I believe the book asks what true royalty means. Louis possesses the throne, but Philippe sometimes shows greater dignity, while Fouquet displays greater mercy. Rank, then, is not the same as nobility. Titles and crowns can be seized, granted, or withdrawn. Loyalty, courage, restraint, and compassion are the qualities that give a human life its real honour. Thank you for staying till the end of The Man in the Iron Mask. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon, and below it my latest video for you to check out. See you next time.